Welcome, dear listeners. Before we begin, a word of caution. This story is not for children or the faint of heart. It is a tale of terror and madness, so if you dare to continue, prepare yourself for a spine-chilling experience. Now gather around and listen closely as I recount the haunting tale of the Suicide Hotel. Nestled high above the Tequendama Falls in Colombia, the Hotel del Salto, or Hotel of the Leap, is one of the most haunted places on Earth. Designed by architect Carlos Arturo Tapias back in 1923, the hotel was meant to be a luxurious retreat with breathtaking views. But over the decades, its reputation became tainted with stories of despair and death. Guests and visitors would come to marvel at the falls, only to be drawn to the edge, compelled to leap into the abyss below. According to local legend, the indigenous Muisca tribe escaped from Spanish colonizers by leaping off the cliffs centuries before, and their spirits never left. In 2023, a century after its grand opening, the hotel had been converted into a museum, but its dark history continued to overshadow its beautiful architecture. Few dared to stay overnight, but those who did often left with tales of ghostly apparitions and eerie whispers in the night. One such visitor was Alejandro, a journalist known for his fascination with the paranormal. He had heard countless stories about the haunted hotel and decided to investigate the legends for himself. Armed with his camera, voice recorder, and a notebook, Alejandro booked a room for a week-long stay at the Hotel del Salto, determined to uncover the truth behind the hauntings. On his first night, Alejandro wandered through the grand halls of the hotel, admiring the ornate architecture and the stunning view of the falls. The air was thick with humidity, and the sound of the rushing water was almost hypnotic. As he explored, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The shadows seemed to move just out of the corner of his eye, and the temperature dropped sharply as he approached the balcony overlooking the falls. That night, Alejandro had trouble sleeping. The bed was comfortable, but the atmosphere in the room was oppressive. He set up his voice recorder and camera, hoping to capture any evidence of paranormal activity. Around midnight, he heard the faint sound of sobbing coming from the hallway. Grabbing his flashlight and camera, he ventured out to investigate. The hallway was dimly lit, and the sobbing grew louder as he approached the end of the corridor. Suddenly, a figure appeared before him, a young woman in a white dress, her eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. She stared at Alejandro for a moment before turning and walking towards the balcony. Alejandro followed, his heart pounding in his chest. As he reached the balcony, the woman vanished, but the air was thick with the scent of flowers and a sense of overwhelming sadness. Alejandro leaned over the railing, looking down at the churning waters of the falls below. For a brief moment, he felt a strange urge to leap, to join the countless souls who had met their end there. Shaking off the feeling, he returned to his room, determined to understand the hotel's dark allure. Over the next few days, Alejandro delved into the history of the Hotel del Salto. He spoke with the museum staff, who shared tales of guests who had disappeared, leaving behind only their belongings and a note expressing their despair. He learned about the Muisca tribe and their tragic escape from the Spanish colonizers, and how their spirits were said to haunt the cliffs, luring the living to join them in death. One afternoon, Alejandro ventured into the basement of the hotel, where the museum stored old artifacts and documents. The air was musty, and the dim lighting cast eerie shadows on the walls. As he sifted through old photographs and newspaper clippings, he found a journal belonging to a former hotel manager, dating back to the 1940s. The journal detailed the manager's attempts to understand the rash of suicides that plagued the hotel. He wrote about guests who had no history of mental illness, suddenly feeling an irresistible urge to leap from the balcony. The manager had consulted with priests, shamans, and even psychologists, but nothing seemed to stop the deaths. In the final entry, the manager wrote about seeing the ghost of a young woman in a white dress, her eyes filled with sorrow. That night, Alejandro sat in his room, the journal open on the table before him. He felt a chill in the air as he read the final entry, and the room seemed to grow darker. Suddenly, the sobbing began again, louder and more insistent than before. Alejandro grabbed his camera and voice recorder, following the sound down the hallway. As he approached the balcony, the sobbing stopped, and the young woman appeared once more. This time she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Help us," she pleaded. "Free us from this torment." Alejandro felt a wave of empathy and sadness wash over him. He reached out to her, but she vanished before his eyes, leaving him alone on the balcony. Determined to uncover the truth, Alejandro spent the next few days interviewing locals and researching the history of the land where the hotel was built. He discovered that the Muisca tribe had considered the falls a sacred place, a gateway to the afterlife. The Spanish colonizers had desecrated the site, building the hotel on what was believed to be cursed ground. One evening, as the sun set behind the falls, Alejandro decided to hold a séance, hoping to communicate with the spirits trapped in the hotel. He gathered a few staff members who were willing to join him and set up candles and a makeshift altar in the hotel's grand ballroom. The atmosphere was tense, and the flickering candlelight cast eerie shadows on the walls. As they began the séance, Alejandro felt a cold breeze sweep through the room. The candles flickered, and the temperature dropped sharply. They held hands, forming a circle, and Alejandro called out to the spirits. "We seek to understand your pain and help you find peace," he said, his voice steady despite the growing unease. Suddenly the room grew darker, and the candles went out, plunging them into darkness. The air was filled with whispers, and the sound of sobbing echoed through the ballroom. Alejandro felt a presence beside him, and when he opened his eyes, he saw the young woman in the white dress standing in the center of their circle. She spoke, her voice filled with sorrow. "We are trapped, bound to this place by the pain and suffering of our past. We need your help to break free." Alejandro felt a surge of determination. "Tell us what we need to do," he said. The woman explained that the spirits were bound to the hotel because of the bloodshed and despair that had taken place there. To free them, they needed to perform a ritual of cleansing and healing. They needed to honor the spirits of the Muisca tribe and the victims of the hotel, acknowledging their pain and offering them a path to peace. Alejandro and the staff spent the next few days preparing for the ritual. They gathered sacred herbs, flowers, and artifacts connected to the Muisca tribe. They invited a shaman to lead the ceremony, seeking his guidance and blessing. On the night of the ritual, they gathered in the grand ballroom, the air thick with anticipation. The shaman began the ceremony, chanting prayers and burning herbs to cleanse the space. The atmosphere grew charged, and the air was filled with a sense of solemnity and reverence. As the ritual progressed, Alejandro felt a shift in the energy of the room. The oppressive darkness seemed to lift, and the whispers grew softer. The young woman in the white dress appeared once more, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "We can finally find peace." The candles burned brightly, casting a warm, soothing light. The shaman continued his chants, and the spirits began to fade, their presence growing lighter. The air was filled with a sense of release and relief as the spirits found their way to the afterlife. When the ritual was complete, Alejandro and the staff felt a profound sense of peace. The hotel, once filled with despair and darkness, now felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. The whispers and sobbing were gone, replaced by a serene silence. In the weeks that followed, Alejandro wrote about his experiences at the Hotel del Salto, sharing the story of the haunting and the ritual that had freed the trapped spirits. His account became widely read, drawing attention to the hotel's dark history and the importance of honoring the past. The Hotel del Salto, now free from its haunted legacy, became a place of reflection and remembrance. Visitors came to learn about the history of the Muisca tribe and the tragic events that had taken place there. The hotel, once a symbol of despair, had become a beacon of healing and understanding. Months after the second investigation, Alejandro tried to return to a semblance of normalcy. The paranormal investigator's footage had gone viral, and he received countless messages from people who wanted to know more about his experience. Many expressed their sympathy, while others shared their own encounters with the supernatural. It was both comforting and overwhelming. Alejandro moved to a new town, hoping a change of scenery would help him escape the constant reminders of Hotel del Salto. He found a quiet apartment and started working at a small bookstore. The mundane routine of shelving books and chatting with customers provided a much-needed distraction from his haunted past. However, even in his new life, the memories of Hotel del Salto refused to fade completely. He often woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, his mind replaying the horrific events he had witnessed. He couldn't shake the feeling that the spirits he had helped were still with him, watching him from the shadows. One particularly restless night, Alejandro decided to face his fears head-on. He set up a small altar in his apartment, placing the journal of the hotel manager, a photograph of the Muisca tribe, and a candle at the center. He lit the candle and sat down, closing his eyes and taking deep breaths. He called out to the spirits, asking for their guidance and hoping to find a sense of closure. To his surprise, the room grew cold, and a familiar presence filled the space. The young woman in the white dress appeared before him, her eyes no longer filled with sorrow but with gratitude. "Thank you, Alejandro," she said softly. "You have freed us, and now we can help you find peace." With those words, Alejandro felt a warmth spread through his body, and a sense of calm washed over him. The oppressive weight that had been haunting him for months lifted, and he finally felt at peace. The young woman smiled and slowly faded away, leaving Alejandro with a profound sense of relief. From that night on, Alejandro no longer experienced the nightmares or the eerie presence of the spirits. He continued his work at the bookstore, finding joy in the simple pleasures of life. He remained dedicated to honoring the past and sharing the stories of those who had suffered, ensuring that their memories would live on. The Hotel del Salto became a symbol of redemption and healing, a testament to the power of understanding and compassion. Visitors from around the world came to experience its beauty and learn about its haunted past, finding solace in the knowledge that the spirits had finally found peace. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, like, and share.